The mimosas were flowing, just the way I like them. At our table, the clinking of glasses was almost as loud as our laughter. Maria was telling a story about her grandson getting stuck in a tree, and Diane was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, partly from laughing and partly, I think, from the sheer joy of a sunny Saturday in Miami. This was my circle, my sanctuary. After Richard passed, these women, this little brunch club of ours, they became my lifeline. It's funny how life works out, isn't it? You build a life with one person, and then one day, you have to build a new one out of the pieces left behind. "Beverly, you're quiet today," Diane said, nudging my arm. "What's on your mind?" A slow smile spread across my face. I couldn't help it. I reached for my purse and pulled out my phone, my fingers expertly swiping through the gallery. "Oh, nothing much," I said, the pride swelling in my chest like a high tide. "Just thinking about my Lauren." I turned the phone around. The screen glowed with a picture from last week. It was Lauren and her new boyfriend, Chase, standing on the boardwalk. Her arm was looped through his, her head tilted back in a laugh, the sun catching the highlights in her hair. And Chase, well, he was just beaming at her. The kind of look every mother wants to see a man give her daughter. "Oh, my goodness, Beverly, they look like a movie poster," Maria cooed, leaning in for a closer look. "Don't they?" I sighed, my heart feeling so full it could burst. "He's wonderful, a financial advisor, so smart, and he just adores her. He calls me Bev. Can you believe it? So informal, but so sweet." I swiped to another picture, Lauren in the new dress I'd bought her. Then another of the two of them having dinner at that new Italian place downtown. I was the curator of her happiness, a walking, talking gallery of her perfect life. Since Richard was gone, all that love, all that energy I had, it all went to her. I'd helped with the down payment on her condo, co-signed for her car. Little things, to make sure she had the start in life that we'd always dreamed of giving her. And she was thriving, or so I believed. It's moments like these, surrounded by people who get it, that you feel truly grateful. It makes you realize how important a strong community is. I wonder if you, listening to my story right now, feel the same way about your friends. Do you have a circle that holds you up? If you do, I hope you cherish it. And if you're looking for a community of people who understand, well, maybe this is a good place to start. Just a thought. "She gets her looks from you, Diane said, squeezing my hand. "And her heart." I felt a little blush of pleasure. "I try," I said. "I really do. I just want her to be happy. I want her to have everything." We spent another hour like that, sipping our drinks, sharing stories, soaking in the comfortable warmth of longtime friendship. I paid the bill, it was my turn, and we all promised to do it again next week. Walking out into the bright, humid air of the city, I felt a profound sense of peace. My friends were happy. My daughter was happy and loved. Everything was in its right place. What more could a mother ask for? The world felt safe. It felt kind. I stood by my car for a moment, the valet holding the door open for me, and I was just overcome with this wave of affection. It was a perfect day, and I wanted to share it. I wanted to tell my daughter how much I loved her, how proud I was of the woman she'd become, of the life she was building with this wonderful man. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over her picture in my contacts, a genuine, unburdened smile on my face. My thumb was just about to press the little green phone icon next to her name. I could already hear her voice in my head, that bright, slightly impatient way she always answered. "Hey, Mom!" But before I could make the call, my own phone buzzed violently in my hand, vibrating with an incoming call that wasn't from her. I glanced down. The screen said unknown number. Normally, I'd just ignore it. Some telemarketer, probably, but something made me hesitate. A little flicker of I don't know what. Annoyance, curiosity. I sighed and pressed the button to answer, bringing the phone to my ear. "Hello," I said, my voice still light from my lovely brunch. Silence, and then a sound that wasn't silence. It was a strange, electronic hum, followed by a voice that was not human. It was stretched, distorted, like a recording being played at the wrong speed, deep and gravelly and utterly devoid of any warmth. "Beverly," the voice rasped. It knew my name. The air in my lungs froze. The cheerful city sounds behind me, the distant salsa music, the traffic on Biscayne Boulevard seemed to warp and fade. "Who is this?" I managed, my own voice suddenly a thin, reedy thing. "That doesn't matter," the voice ground out, each word slow and deliberate, a rock being dragged across concrete. "What matters is that we have your daughter. We have Lauren." No, my mind just refused. It was a joke, a prank, a wrong number. It had to be, my daughter was safe. I had just seen a picture of her, happy and smiling. This was a mistake. "You're mistaken," I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice trembled. "I think you have the wrong person." "Does she have a small birthmark on her left shoulder, shaped like a little crescent moon?" The blood drained from my face. I felt dizzy, lightheaded. I had to brace myself against the side of my car. How could anyone know that? I used to call it her little moonbeam when she was a baby. It was our secret. "What do you want?" I whispered, the words barely audible. $75,000, the voice said, without a trace of emotion. "From your retirement account. You will have it ready for withdrawal by 5 o'clock this evening. You will be given instructions on where to drop it. You will do this, or the next time you see Lauren, it will be on the evening news." My heart was a wild drum against my ribs. 75,000, that was almost everything Richard had left me, everything I had. But it didn't matter. None of it mattered, only Lauren. "And Beverly," the voice continued, its tone dropping even lower if that were possible. "One more thing, no police, no friends, no one. If we even think you've told a soul, the deal is off, and Lauren pays the price. Do you understand me?" I tried to speak, to form a word, but my throat was closed tight. And then, through the phone, I heard it. A sound that shattered the last of my composure. It was faint, muffled, but it was unmistakably Lauren's. A terrified sob, a little cry of "Mom," before it was cut off abruptly. That sound, that tiny, desperate sound. It bypassed my brain and shot straight into my soul. It was real. This was all horribly, terrifyingly real. My baby was in trouble. My baby needed me. "I understand," I choked out, tears now streaming down my face, hot against my cold skin. "Please, please don't hurt her. I'll get the money. I'll do anything." The line went dead. Just click. Gone. The sudden silence was more horrifying than the voice. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. The bright Miami sun felt like a spotlight in a horror movie. The world, which had felt so safe and kind just minutes before, was now spinning, tilting on its axis. The cheerful sounds of the city, the laughter from a nearby cafe, the music, it all sounded menacing now, distant and mocking, like sounds from a world I no longer belonged to. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand, heavy and cold. My first instinct, the one that screamed through the fog of terror, was to do the exact opposite of what the voice had commanded. Call the police. Call everybody. Scream for help from the rooftops. But the voice's threat was a cage, its bars made of my love for Lauren. Lauren pays the price. That phrase echoed and echoed, a demonic chant inside my skull. I have no memory of getting into my car, no memory of driving home. The 10-minute drive from the restaurant to my condo could have been an hour, or it could have been a second. All I saw was that distorted voice. All I heard was Lauren's muffled sob. When I finally found myself fumbling with the key to my own front door, my hands were shaking so violently it took 3 tries to get it in the lock. My condo has always been my pride and joy. Clean, orderly, with everything in its place. White couches, glass tables, fresh orchids on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of calm. Today it felt like a prison cell. I slammed the door shut, leaning against it as if to keep the entire dangerous world out. But the danger was already inside. It was in my head and in my heart. I started pacing. From the living room to the kitchen, then back again. A frantic, trapped animal in a beautiful cage. My mind was a whirlwind of impossible choices. If I called the police, I was disobeying a direct order. I was putting a target on my daughter's back. I was gambling with her life based on a stranger's mercy. What if they were watching me? What if they knew? The thought made my skin crawl. But if I didn't call, what then? I go to the bank. I withdraw my life savings, every dollar Richard and I had worked for. I hand it over to a monster with a distorted voice. And then what? Do I trust a criminal to keep his word? Do I believe that this person, who was capable of kidnapping a young woman, would simply let her go once he had the money? It was absurd. It was naive. My hand hovered over my phone, my thumb scrolling past Lauren's contact to Diane's. To Maria's, I could call them. They would be here in a heartbeat. They would wrap their arms around me, they would help me think. But the voice had said, no friends, no one. The threat had isolated me completely. This was my burden, my terror, and mine alone. For the first time in my life, my social circle, my greatest strength. H was useless. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone with this decision. An hour passed, or maybe it was a lifetime. I paced until my feet ached, my mind circling the same terrifying loop. Pay and pray or call and risk. Both paths led to a cliff. And then something shifted. A different part of my brain, a part that had been dormant under the panic, slowly started to come online. It was the part of me that had spent 30 years as a manager at one of Miami's top hotels. I had dealt with crises before. Fires, hurricanes, medical emergencies demanding celebrity guests who thought the world revolved around them. And in every single crisis, what was the first rule? The absolute, unbreakable rule: you follow procedure. You do not panic. You assess the situation and you call in the professionals. You do not try to handle a bomb threat on your own. You do not try to negotiate with a man having a heart attack. You call the experts. This was no different. This was a crisis far beyond my abilities. The people on the other end of that phone were professionals in violence and fear. But the police, they were professionals in stopping them. My fear didn't vanish, not at all. But for the first time, it was joined by a flicker of something else. Logic. A cold, hard, terrifying logic that said paying the ransom was the emotional choice, but calling the police was the strategic one. It was the only move I had. It was a terrible, awful gamble, but it was a gamble on the side of order, not chaos. I stopped pacing. I stood in the middle of my silent, perfect living room and took a deep, shuddering breath. I looked at the picture of Lauren on the mantelpiece, the one from her college graduation. Her smile was so bright, so full of promise. My heart ached with a love so fierce it felt like it could tear me apart. I was her mother. My only job was to protect her. And this, I realized, was the only way I could. With a hand that still trembled, but was now steady with purpose, I picked up my phone. I ignored the unknown number in my call history and pressed the 3 numbers I never thought I would have to dial for myself. My voice was a whisper when the dispatcher answered, a fragile, broken thing. "My daughter," I sobbed, the words finally breaking free. "My daughter, she's been kidnapped." The words hung in the air long after I said them, heavy and irreversible. On the other end of the line, the dispatcher's voice was unnervingly calm, a steady, professional drone that was a world away from the screaming chaos inside my own head. She told me to stay where I was, to not touch anything, and that a unit was on its way. The call ended, and the silence that followed was somehow even worse than before. It was the silence of a clock that had been set, a terrible countdown that had just begun. It felt like an eternity, but it must have only been 15 minutes before the doorbell chimed. The sound, usually so welcoming, made me jump out of my skin. I peered through the peephole and saw 2 people in plain clothes. They looked serious, official. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The woman was probably in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but there was a softness around her mouth that kept her from looking hard. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Serrano," she said, her voice calm and even. "This is my partner, Detective Miller." She gestured to the younger man beside her, who gave me a solemn nod. I just nodded and stepped aside to let them in. They moved with a quiet efficiency that was both comforting and terrifying. They were bringing order to my chaos, but their presence made the whole nightmare irrevocably real. "Can you walk us through it?" Detective Serrano asked, her gaze gentle as I led them into the living room. "From the beginning, every detail you can remember." So I did. Sitting on the edge of my pristine white couch, I recounted the entire horrifying phone call. My voice shook, and tears I thought I didn't have left started to fall again. I told them about the distorted voice, the demand for $75,000, the specific threat about the evening news. And the worst part, I had to force the words out. "I heard her," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I heard Lauren, she cried for me." They listened patiently, without interruption. Detective Miller took notes in a small, black notebook, while Detective Serrano just watched me, her expression unreadable but attentive. When I was finished, a raw, ragged silence filled the room. "Okay, Beverly," Serrano said, her tone shifting from passive listening to active investigation. "We need to know a little bit about Lauren. What's she like?" A small, watery smile touched my lips. It felt strange to smile, but talking about my daughter was my default setting. "She's wonderful," I said, the familiar pride pushing through the fear. "She's bright, so full of life. She works in Keating. Everyone loves her." "Does she have any enemies? Anyone who might want to harm her?" Miller asked, looking up from his notepad. "No, absolutely not," I said, maybe a little too quickly. "Lauren doesn't have an enemy in the world. She's a good person, a kind person." "What about money?" Serrano asked, her question quiet but sharp. "Does she have any financial troubles, any debts we should be aware of?" I felt a prickle of defensiveness. "Well, I mean, who doesn't these days?" I said with a weak laugh. Miami is an expensive city, but she manages. She and her boyfriend, Chase, they do just fine. He's a wonderful young man, a financial advisor. He's been such a help to her. I was building a fortress of words around my daughter, protecting the perfect image I held of her. Chase, Serrano repeated, making a note of the name. How long have they been together? About 6 months, I said. It's serious. I think he might be the one. He just fits, you know. He fits right into our family. The detectives exchanged a look. It was so quick, so subtle, I might have missed it if my senses weren't heightened to a razor's edge. It wasn't a look of suspicion, exactly. It was more like a look of professional process, a recognition of a pattern. For the first time, a cold, slithering tendril of unease curled in my stomach. It had nothing to do with the kidnapper. It was something else, something I couldn't name. Detective Serrano leaned forward slightly. Beverly, the people who do this, they often know their victims. The fact that they knew your name, knew about Lauren, and knew to ask for a specific amount of money from your retirement, it suggests this might not be random. What are you saying? I asked, my voice small. We're not saying anything yet, she said gently. We're just gathering information. To do that, we need your help. With your permission, we'd like to start an immediate trace on your daughter's cell phone. We also need to get in touch with her bank and credit card companies to monitor for any activity. Yes, of course, I said, relief flooding me. This was progress. This was what I wanted. Do whatever it takes to find them, the criminals who did this. I was so sure, so absolutely certain, that tracing her phone and her cards was the first step to finding the monster with the distorted voice and bringing my baby home. Of course, I said, my voice filled with a desperate sort of confidence. Do whatever it takes to find them, the criminals who did this. I had nothing to hide. Lauren had nothing to hide. We were the victims here. I was sure that every piece of data they uncovered from her phone or her bank accounts would be a breadcrumb leading them straight to the monsters who had her. Or so I thought. The detectives left, and the silence they left behind was heavy, thick with unspoken possibilities. They told me to stay by the phone, to try and act normal if the kidnapper called again with instructions. Act normal. The request was so absurd it would have been laughable on any other day of my life. How could I act normal when my entire world had been ripped from its foundations? The hours that followed were the longest of my existence. Time seemed to stretch and warp. Every minute that ticked by on the grandfather clock in the hall was a hammer blow, counting down to the 5 o'clock deadline. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sit still. I paced the length of my living room, my bare feet wearing a path in the plush rug. I'd pause by the window, looking out at the impossibly blue sky, wondering where my daughter was, if she was scared, if she was cold, if she was alive. I kept pushing that last thought away, but it was a persistent, ugly weed, constantly pushing its way back through the cracks in my composure. My phone, when it finally rang, shrieked through the silence so loudly that I gasped and dropped the glass of water I was holding. It shattered on the marble floor, but I didn't care. I scrambled for the phone, my heart pounding in my throat. It was Detective Serrano. "Beverly," she said, her voice the same steady, professional calm. "We have something." A wave of dizzying relief washed over me. "You found her. Is she okay?" "We don't have her location pinned down just yet," she said, and my heart sank again. "But we did get a flag on her financials. There was a charge on her main credit card. It was made less than an hour ago." "A charge," I repeated, confused. What do you mean, like an ATM withdrawal? Did they take money? No, not a withdrawal, Serrano said. It was a purchase, at a place called the Ocean's Edge Resort and Spa. I knew the place. It was a high-end, exclusive resort down in the Keys, a place for honeymoons and fancy getaways. The information didn't compute. The Keys, why would they take her there? Are they holding her in a hotel room? The charge wasn't for a room, Beverly, the detective continued, and I could hear the careful, deliberate way she was choosing our words. The charge was from the poolside bar. It was for $96.50. Poolside bar. The words sounded like a foreign language. Kidnappers don't take their victims to a poolside bar. They don't buy rounds of drinks on their credit cards. A frantic, desperate explanation formed in my mind, the only one that made any sense. They took her wallet, I said, my voice rising with a new kind of panic. That must be it. They have her wallet, her cards. They're using them. Oh my God, are they taunting me? Are they just enjoying themselves on my daughter's dime before they? I couldn't finish the sentence. I could hear the detective take a slow breath on the other end of the line. It was the kind of breath someone takes before they have to deliver bad news. The kind of breath that prepares you for an impact. Her voice, when she spoke again, was still calm, but it was firm now, with an edge of something that cut right through my denial. Ma'am, the charge was for 2 pina coladas and an order of coconut shrimp. And the cell phone that you identified as Lauren's, the one we've been tracking, it's not in some dark warehouse or the trunk of a car. For the past 3 hours, it's been pinging steadily from a single location. It's at the same resort. The detective's words didn't make sense. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where none of the pieces fit, their edges all wrong, the colors all clashing. A resort, pina coladas, my daughter's phone. My mind, in a desperate act of self-preservation, tried to jam the pieces together into a shape it recognized. Maybe they're forcing her, I stammered into the phone, the idea sounding flimsy even to my own ears. Forcing her to act normal, so no one gets suspicious. Yes, that must be it. It's a trick, a performance. I was babbling, my logic twisting itself into knots to avoid the simple, horrifying picture the evidence was painting. Beverly, listen to me. Detective Serrano's voice was sharp now, cutting through my frantic rationalizations. We ran a preliminary background check on the boyfriend, on Chase. Chase, I repeated his name, confused. What does he have to do with this? He's a victim, too. They must have taken him as well. His full name is Chase Ryland, she said, ignoring my outburst. He's not a financial advisor, Beverly. He has no license. What he does have is a record. 2 charges for credit card fraud in Tampa 3 years ago and another for a bad check scheme in Orlando. The charges were dropped, but the pattern is there. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Not a financial advisor. A record. The words were stones dropping into a deep, dark well inside me. Chase, the charming, successful man who adored my daughter, who fit so perfectly into our family, it was all a lie. The perfect picture I'd been so proud of began to crack at the edges. I don't understand, I whispered. We're trying to, ma'am, she said, her voice softening just a fraction. The resort manager is cooperating. He's pulling the security footage from the poolside bar for us right now. I want you to prepare yourself. I might be sending you an image to identify. Prepare myself. How do you prepare for something you can't even imagine? I sank onto my couch, the phone slick with sweat in my palm. I stared at a single, perfect white orchid on my mantelpiece, trying to focus on its beauty, trying to hold onto the memory of the world as it was just a few hours ago. A world where my daughter was safe and her life was perfect. A moment later, my phone chimed with an incoming text message. It was from the detective. My hand was shaking so much I could barely tap the notification to open it. The image downloaded slowly, a gray bar crawling across the top of the screen. And then it loaded. The shock was so total, so absolute, that it felt like a physical blow. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. For a moment, I couldn't see, I couldn't hear. There was only the glowing screen of the phone and the picture that was burning itself onto my soul. It was them. It was Lauren and Chase. They were sprawled on a plush, white lounge chair under a big blue umbrella. The ocean sparkled behind them. They were laughing. Not a polite smile, but a full-throated, head-thrown-back laugh of pure, unadulterated joy. They were clinking their glasses together in a toast. Lauren was wearing her blue bikini, the one she said made her feel confident. And on her face, perched on her nose, were the brand-new designer sunglasses I had bought her for her birthday last month. In the bottom corner of the image, in small, white digital letters, was the timestamp. It was from 20 minutes ago. My world didn't just crack, it disintegrated. It turned to dust and blew away in an instant. The fortress I had built around my daughter, the one made of pride and denial and unconditional love, was annihilated. The two images warred in my mind with sickening violence, the memory of her muff. Lead, terrified sob on the phone, and the sight of her here, laughing without a care in the world. They couldn't both be real, which meant one of them was a lie. And the timestamp on this photo was the cruel, undeniable truth. I stared at the laughing girl on the screen, a stranger with my daughter's face, and my mind simply refused to connect her to the crying victim I had been ready to die for. My blind spot wasn't just a spot. It was a vast, empty chasm, and it had just been shattered into a million pieces. It wasn't a kidnapping. It was a performance, a horribly convincing, cruelly staged play, and I was the only person in the audience. The detectives came back to my condo an hour later. I was still sitting on the couch, the phone with its glowing, treacherous image lying screen up on the cushion beside me. I hadn't moved. The shattered pieces of the water glass were still on the floor, glittering like fallen stars. I felt nothing. The terror, the panic, the desperate hope, it had all been burned away, leaving behind a cold, hollow emptiness. They didn't sit this time. They stood in front of me, and Detective Serrano placed a thin file folder on my glass coffee table. She opened it. The contents weren't gruesome, but they were a different kind of horror. They were the architecture of my daughter's betrayal. The call was made from a prepaid burner phone, Serrano began, her voice factual, devoid of pity. That was good. I didn't want pity. Pity was for victims of circumstance. This was something else entirely. It was purchased for cash at a convenience store on the Tamiami Trail last Tuesday by a man matching Chase's description. She slid a grainy security photo across the table. A man in a baseball cap buying a phone. It was him. We got a warrant for their financial records, she continued, tapping a sheet of paper covered in numbers. Lauren and Chase are in debt, deeply. Credit cards maxed out, a personal loan in default. They were facing eviction from their apartment at the end of the month. The picture of their perfect life, the one I had so proudly curated for my friends, dissolved into a mirage. They weren't thriving. They were drowning. And instead of asking for a lifeline, they had decided to pull me under with them. The distorted voice on the call, Miller added, speaking for the first time. There are apps for that. It's easy to do. We believe it was Chase. But the final, most sickening piece of the puzzle was the one that Serrano pointed to next. It was a copy of my own retirement account statement. I didn't know how they'd gotten it. The ransom amount, Beverly, she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. $75,000. It wasn't a random number. It's the exact amount you had in your liquid retirement savings. That was the twist of the knife. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a calculated, premeditated act designed for one purpose, to drain me of everything I had left. They knew the number. They knew my love for Lauren was my weakness. Her muffled cry on the phone, it wasn't a cry of fear. It was a line of dialogue, a special effect. She wasn't a victim. She was the co-writer, the producer, and the star of this sickening little production. Every loving gesture I had ever made, every check I had ever written to help her, had not been a gift. It had been research. A new emotion began to fill the cold, hollow space inside me. It started as a low flicker and grew, moment by moment, into a steady, consuming fire. It was rage. An icy, quiet rage that was deeper and more profound than any feeling I had ever known. My love for my daughter had been vast and unconditional. The betrayal, therefore, was just as vast. The scales were perfectly, horribly balanced. I finally looked up from the papers on the table and met Detective Serrano's gaze. The naive, trusting socialite was gone. I could feel it. I was someone else now, someone harder, colder. The detective must have seen the change in my eyes. Her expression softened, shifting from professional investigator to something more human. She closed the file. Beverly, she said, her voice quiet but clear. We know where they are, we know what they've done. We have enough to move in and make the arrests for conspiracy to commit grand theft and extortion. But they are still in that hotel room at the ocean's edge, enjoying the sun. We're ready to go, but this started with you. It feels right that it should end with your word. What do you want us to do? The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. What do you want us to do? For one final, agonizing second, the icy rage receded, and a wave of pure maternal grief washed over me. An image flashed in my mind, vivid and painful. It was Lauren, age 5, with scraped knees and tear-filled eyes, running to me after falling off her bike. I remembered the feel of her small arms wrapped around my neck, the absolute, unconditional trust in her eyes. My job for her N. Entire life had been to soothe her tears, to kiss her scraped knees, to make the world safe for her. My sweet child. My gaze drifted from the detectives' impassive faces to the coffee table. The evidence was still laid out like a post-mortem of my love. On one side was my cell phone, still displaying the photo I'd shown my friends at brunch. A photo of my daughter, the one I had raised, the one I had adored. On the other side was the file, with the grainy security image of the laughing stranger at the resort. The woman who looked like Lauren, who wore her clothes and her smile, but who was a monster. I looked from one photo to the other. The loving daughter, the laughing criminal. And in that moment, the grief died and the cold, hard clarity returned. They were not the same person. The little girl with the scraped knees was gone. Maybe she had been gone for a long, long time, and my love, my determined blindness, had simply refused to see it. The woman laughing by the pool with her con man boyfriend, planning to steal her own mother's life savings, that was not my daughter. That was a stranger who had been living in my daughter's skin. You do not protect a stranger who is trying to destroy you. You do not show mercy to a predator who has marked you as prey, even if they have a familiar face. My love for my daughter was a home, and this stranger had tried to burn it to the ground. Slowly, deliberately, I rose from the couch. I felt a strange new strength in my limbs, a straightness in my spine that hadn't been there before. The part of me that had always cared so much about what other people thought, my friends, my community, my daughter, was gone. The only opinion that mattered now was my own. I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up the silver-framed photo of Lauren at her graduation. I held it for a moment, tracing the outline of her smiling face with my thumb. Then I turned it face down. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. It was an ending. I turned back to the detectives. My voice, when I spoke, was not the voice of the weeping, panicked woman they had met earlier. It was steady. It was clear. It was a voice they had not heard before. It was a voice I had not heard before. She knew exactly what she was doing, I said, each word a perfectly formed piece of ice. She sat with that man, her partner, and they planned it. They planned how to manipulate me, how to use my love for her against me. They decided that $75,000 was more valuable than her own mother. She made her choice. I paused, letting the finality of that statement settle in the room. I looked directly into Detective Serrano's eyes. Now I'm making mine. Do your job. Detective Serrano held my gaze for a long moment. There was no pity in her eyes anymore. There was something else. Respect. A quiet, professional acknowledgement of a difficult decision made. She gave a single, sharp nod. "We'll be in touch," she said. She and Miller turned and walked to the door, their movements crisp and purposeful now. They didn't need to say anything more. I knew what was happening. The gears of the law, which had been waiting for my signal, were now turning. The police operation, a quiet, efficient machine, was springing into motion. I didn't watch them leave. I just stood at the window of my condo, wrapping my arms around myself. Outside, the ocean was a deep, turbulent blue, the whitecaps churning under a darkening sky. It looked just like I felt inside. A hurricane of betrayal and rage, with a dead, quiet calm at its very center. I had set something in motion that I could not stop. I had aimed a weapon at my own child, and all I could do now was wait for the sound of the impact. I didn't have to imagine what happened next. Detective Serrano, with a professionalism I was beginning to see as a form of kindness, painted the picture for me later. She thought I deserved to know. Down in the Keys, the sun was still shining. At the Ocean's Edge Resort and Spa, beautifully tanned people were sipping cocktails and lounging by the infinity pool. It was a bubble of blissful, expensive ignorance. But a different kind of guest was checking in. 4 uniformed officers from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, along with 2 plainclothes detectives, moved quietly through the opulent lobby, their presence a stark, serious contrast to the vacationers in their swimsuits and designer sunglasses. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor. They didn't knock. They used a key card provided by hotel security. The door to room 314 swung open silently. And there they were, Lauren and Chase. They weren't laughing anymore. They were in the middle of an argument, their voices sharp and ugly. The room, which cost more per night than my monthly grocery bill, was a disaster. Not with violence, but with indulgence. Shopping bags from every high-end boutique in the resort's arcade were strewn across the king-sized bed and the floor. Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton. They had been celebrating their victory before they'd even won, spending money they hadn't even stolen yet. They froze when the door opened, their mouths falling open in disbelief. Their eyes went wide as the uniformed officers filled the doorway. Lauren Miller, Chase Ryland, one of the local detectives asked, his voice booming in the suddenly silent room. What is this? Chase stammered, his charming smile gone, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed panic. There must be some mistake. Lauren, however, found her voice first, and it was not the voice of a victim. It was the indignant screech of someone whose party had been interrupted. "What are you doing in our room? Get out! I'll have you all fired." The officers ignored her. They moved in swiftly, professionally. One of them began listing the charges: conspiracy, extortion, while the other two produced handcuffs. The sharp, metallic click as the cuffs closed around Chase's wrists echoed in the room. His face was a mask of pure terror. But Lauren fought. She tried to pull away, her face contorted in a sneer of righteous fury. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "My mother will sue you, she'll." Her voice trailed off as she saw the look on the detective's face. A look of cold, weary pity. And in that moment, she must have known. She must have realized that her mother wasn't going to sue anyone. Her mother was the one who had sent them. Her face, the one that had been laughing in the sun just hours before, crumpled. It wasn't a look of remorse. It was the look of a gambler who had just lost everything on a single, arrogant bet. The phone rang in my quiet condo, and I answered on the first ring. "We have them," Detective Serrano said. Her voice was simple, factual. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "It's over." Just those 3 words, "We have them." A wave of something washed over me. It wasn't relief. It wasn't satisfaction. It certainly wasn't joy. It was just quiet. It was the profound, echoing silence after a massive explosion. There was no joy in my heart, only a vast, empty, windswept space where my love and trust for my daughter used to be. "Thank you," I replied, my voice a stranger's in my own ear. I ended the call and set the phone down on the glass table. The silence in my condo was a physical presence. It was heavier than furniture, thicker than the humid Miami air outside. It was the sound of a life that had been permanently altered. As I knew it would, the story broke a day later. It was a local news sensation, a story too sensational to ignore. "Miami socialite's daughter fakes own kidnapping." The headlines were lurid, and the details, when they leaked, were humiliating. For a woman like me, who had spent her life building a community and caring about her reputation, it was a special kind of hell. I imagined the whispers at the grocery store, the pitying looks from neighbors. For a few days, I didn't leave my home. I felt like a prisoner again, but this time, the cage was made of shame. But then something I hadn't expected happened. My real friends, Maria and Diane, didn't just call. They showed up. They came armed with groceries, a bottle of good wine, and a fierce, protective loyalty that felt like a shield. They didn't offer platitudes or easy comforts. They sat with me in the silence. They let me talk when I wanted to, and they let me stare out the window when I didn't. They screened my calls and answered my door, turning away the one local reporter who was bold enough to come knocking. They were my wall. They were my sanctuary. The calls from the county jail started on the 3rd day. Lauren's name would flash on the caller ID, a name that now looked foreign to me. The first time, my hand trembled as I silenced the ringer. The second time, I just let it ring until it stopped. After the fifth call, I had the number blocked. What was there to say? Her tears, which I'm sure were flowing freely now, were not for the pain she had caused me. They were for herself. They were the tears of a performer whose show had been canceled. I had no interest in giving her another audience. In the quiet days that followed, I did a lot of thinking. I grieved. But I realized I wasn't grieving for the daughter who was sitting in a jail cell. I was grieving for the daughter who had never existed at all. The smiling, loving, perfect girl in all my pictures. She was the ghost, the one who was truly gone. I started to look back, not with the rosy filter of a proud mother, but with the cold, clear eyes of a woman who had been betrayed. I remembered all the times she'd needed money for car trouble that miraculously appeared right before a vacation. The expensive gifts she'd given Chase, which I'd assumed he'd paid for himself. The subtle ways she dismissed my concerns, making me feel old-fashioned or out of touch. They weren't just isolated incidents. They were data points on a graph, a long, slow, downward line of deceit that I had simply refused to read. I was learning a hard lesson, one that life had saved for my 68th year. The lesson that family is not just about blood. Blood is a fact. Family is a choice. It's a verb. It's the loyalty of a friend who brings you soup when you're broken. It's the respect in a detective's eyes. It is not, I now knew, the easy smile of a child who sees you not as a person, but as a resource. One afternoon, about a week after the arrest, I was standing in my living room and I felt tired. Not just tired from the ordeal, but tired of the room itself. It was a museum to a life that wasn't real. Every surface held a framed photograph of Lauren. Lauren at the beach. Lauren blowing out birthday candles. Lauren at her graduation, holding a piece of paper that certified her education, the one I had paid for. I walked over to the wall of photos, a collection I had once called my wall of joy. I looked at them one by one, and then I began to take them down. I didn't smash them. I didn't throw them away. I just carefully, methodically removed each one, leaving a pale, blank space on the wall where it used to be. With each picture I removed, the room felt lighter. The air felt easier to breathe. I looked around at the blank spaces, at the silent condo. It wasn't empty anymore. It was clear. It was a blank canvas. And for the first time in a long, long time, I realized it was time to redecorate. It was time to build a life that was truly, finally, my own. Standing in my quiet, emptier living room, I learned the most painful lesson of my life. That the most dangerous lies aren't told by strangers in the dark. They're told by the people who have spent a lifetime learning the exact shape of your heart, so they know precisely where to strike. There is a very fine, almost invisible line between loving someone and enabling their darkness. For years, I had poured my love into what I thought was a garden, never realizing I was only watering the weeds. My story isn't really about a faked kidnapping or stolen money. It's about that terrible, gut-wrenching moment when you have to choose between the person you love and the person you need to be to survive. True strength, I've discovered, isn't about building walls so you never get hurt. It's about having the courage to make a devastating choice, like calling the police on your own child, when your heart is breaking into a million pieces. It's about surviving the impact and then making the deliberate choice to heal and to learn to trust again, not blindly, but more wisely. I want to ask you, the person listening right now, have you ever had to make an impossible choice to protect yourself from someone you loved? The path is incredibly lonely, but you are not alone in walking it. If my story resonated with you, I hope you'll consider liking and sharing it. And please, subscribe for more stories of resilience. The comments below are a safe space for you to share your own experiences, not for judgment, but for community. Because sometimes, the simple act of telling your story is the first step toward taking your life back. Thank you for listening.